Okay, we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third working group meeting for the Newton Corner Long-Term Planning Study. My name is Patrick Snyder, and I'm the MassDOT project manager for this effort. Before we get started today, we'd like to review some Zoom procedures so that we're all on the same page. I'm going to start off by noting that normally we host these meetings as Zoom webinars. Today, we're hosting it as a Zoom meeting, which has expanded functionality for you to turn on your video and audio options. We are going to be carrying out breakout rooms later in this meeting, so that helps us enable that. Looking at the procedures themselves, we will have the opportunity for discussion later in the meeting between the breakout rooms and a comment period. You're welcome to share questions and comments during the meeting in the chat at the bottom of your screen. When we get to the discussion period and the breakout rooms later, if you'd like to speak verbally, you're welcome to raise your hand virtually by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. You can also click Alt-Y as a keyboard shortcut. If you're on the phone, you can dial *9, which will raise your virtual hand, and we'll see it on the screen here, and we'll recognize you verbally to speak. If you're unable to access the internet or have technical problems during this meeting, you can call in on the phone at 1-646-876-9923 and enter the webinar ID 816-0070-6695. You'll then enter the passcode 733794. If you're watching this meeting on a computer, you can use the view button at the top right of your screen to adjust the view settings. Closed captioning is available for this meeting. It's automatically generated by Zoom, and you can activate it by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen. If you have trouble with the meeting technology today, you can call 1-888-799-9666, and that will connect you to Zoom technical support. In terms of our meeting procedures, today's meeting is a working group meeting that is open to the public. As I said, we're carrying it out today as a Zoom meeting, not a Zoom webinar. So you all have the options to toggle your video and audio. We ask you to bear that in mind, please. This meeting is being recorded today. We're recording the main presentation session, and we plan on recording the breakout rooms as well. So please bear that in mind, as this is part of the public record, and MassDOT maintains the right to distribute this video and audio later. We welcome all questions and comments. Thank you for being here today. We would love for you to share them. We appreciate them, but we do ask that you refrain from any disrespectful comments, please. So welcome to our meeting. Looking at our agenda, we want to give a quick summary of what we overheard at the first public information meeting, which we held last October, October 8th, 2024. We'll just give a quick summary of what we heard there. We're then going to review our future conditions projections. Future conditions lay the foundation for our development of alternatives and eventual alternatives analysis, which we're also going to start discussing today. We're going to review the issues, opportunities, and constraints we summarized based on feedback that we've previously heard from the working group, as well as the public during that first public information meeting. Then we're going to shift into a preliminary discussion of alternatives development, some ideas that we've started to put together. Please note these are all draft ideas. Nothing is final. Before we get too far into actual concepts development, we'd like your feedback just to make sure that we're all on the same page on what you guys want to see. We'll then outline next steps following today's meeting and open up the floor to a broader discussion for other questions and comments related to this work. We do also want to provide a reminder of the ground rules for working group meetings. We established these at the first meeting last May. A reminder, we do ask you to please remain respectful in all dialogues during the study process. We're all interested in the same goal of achieving meaningful improvements to Newton Corner. You are all welcome to attend all meetings. If you can't make it, please send an email and you can let me know if you'd like another person to attend on your behalf if you're a working group member. Please keep the distractions to a minimum by muting your audio when you're not speaking and keeping your devices on silent. For all these meetings, you can have your video on or off, but if it becomes distracting, meeting staff may turn either off. And just another reminder that these meetings are all recorded and we're posting them on the study website along with presentations and other relevant materials. And one last thing before we move forward, we do want to reiterate our study goals, which are helping shape the trajectory of this study. The goals are not in any particular order. They're being used to guide our thought process. Our goals for this study are improve access, safety, and mobility for all in Newton Corner, reconnect Newton's neighborhoods, enhance quality of life, promote sustainable transportation solutions, and develop actionable recommendations that could be advanced. These goals have all been further fleshed out into objectives for specificity. The full documentation of those objectives can be found on the study website. And I'm going to pass it over to Christine.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm Christine Triarchis, the project manager from VHB for this study, and I'm going to give a brief summary of what we heard at our first public meeting back in October. So, at our first public meeting held October 8th, we had over 50 attendees from the public attend. We asked those attendees to respond to the question, if you could envision the future of Newton Corner, what word would you use to describe it? So the word cloud that you see on your screen represents the responses that we received. And as you can see, themes of safer, connected, accessible, and community were the most prevalent responses. After the presentation, we received about 30 questions and comments during the Q&A period with themes of traffic and infrastructure improvements, accessibility and connectivity, and environmental and social impacts. I'm now going to hand it over to Matt Duranlo to review the future conditions analysis.
Thank you, Christine. I'm Matt Duranlo, the mobility lead from VHB for this study, and I'm going to give a short summary on the future conditions analysis. Before I do, I just want to apologize for my hoarse voice. I've been fighting a cold for a week and a half, and it just won't kick, but should be feeling good. All right, so prior to developing the alternatives, we projected out to a future year of 2050 to understand the mobility, environmental, and land use projections in the future if no alternatives are implemented. While the study team conducted a thorough evaluation and analysis of future conditions, today I'm just going to provide a high-level overview, and the full future conditions analysis will be documented. To determine the future growth, the study team used the Central Transportation Planning Staff's, or CTPS's, statewide travel demand model for the year 2050. Based on the model, population and employment are both anticipated to increase by about 10% in the study area by 2050. The largest population and employment growth is projected in the Alston-Brighton area, which is expected to see population grow by about 20% and employment grow by about 15% by 2050. We also did a review of currently known development projects in the planning or proposal stages in the study area and found that there are over 5,000 residential units and 6 million square feet of commercial space that's currently in the development pipeline. We also coordinated with local municipalities and agencies, a lot of you on the call today, to anticipate the changes to the transit and roadway network. On the transit side, there are several improvements currently under development, such as the bus network redesign and the Newton commuter rail station's accessibility improvements. As many of you are aware, funding for the Newtonville station accessibility improvements was awarded late last year. We understand that transit will play an important future role in moving residents and workers around the study area, and all these transit improvements are incorporated in our 2050 future projections. Our future projections also included proposed roadway infrastructure investments. There are currently several roadway improvement projects under development in the study area, including the Leo Birmingham Parkway reconstruction, the North Beacon Street at Soldiers Field Road roadway realignment, spearheaded by DCR, the Washington Street pilot in Newton, spearheaded by the City of Newton, and the Watertown Square area plan in Watertown, to name a few. A common theme we found in these proposed improvements is that they are primarily focused on improving safety and enhancing multimodal accommodations as opposed to increasing vehicular capacity. On the active transportation side, we identified several new and proposed facilities for bicyclists, such as new infrastructure on North Beacon Street, Western Avenue, Mount Auburn Street, and Washington Street. Most of these new facilities will improve bicycle connections in the east-west direction. However, based on the currently proposed improvements, there are still expected to be gaps in the future network in the north-south direction, including across I-90 and connecting to and from the Charles River pathways. With the proposed land use changes and the known infrastructure improvements, we then reviewed the anticipated volume and ridership growth in the study area. Using the statewide travel demand model, which includes the known transit and roadway improvement projects I just talked about, and calibrating based on the known development projects, we found that transit ridership is expected to increase by about 12 to 28% within the study area, and vehicle volumes are expected to increase by 6 to 13% in the local study area by 2050. Transit ridership is anticipated to grow quicker than vehicle volumes due to improved transit infrastructure and limited capacity on the roadway network for additional demand. However, the overall mode shares by 2050 are not expected to dramatically shift, as current network users are not anticipated to alter their mode choices substantially. With the projected increase in vehicle volumes associated with the new residents and workers traveling through the study area, traffic operations in the local study area are expected to deteriorate by 2050. If left unaddressed, this growth will impact reliability, potentially leading to increased congestion or further extending of the commuter peak periods. The final future conditions element we want to highlight today are future environmental considerations. The study area faces significant risks in the future from extreme temperature fluctuations, increased precipitation, and flooding along the Charles River. And by 2050, Massachusetts is expected to experience significant temperature increases. It's important to remember these environmental considerations as we progress into the alternatives development. And now I'll hand it back over to Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. As part of this study process, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. As part of this study process, we are documenting issues, opportunities, and constraints. We began this process back in existing conditions and shared a snapshot of the themes related to existing conditions back in October. These were based on a review of existing conditions data, previous studies of this area already completed, and input from all of you, our working group. We've since added, based on our future conditions evaluation, as well as public comments received, including comments received through our online mapping tool. If you haven't had a chance to contribute already, please feel free to use the QR code on your screen. There will also be a link later on in the slides to view our virtual meeting room and take the survey. Here's a summary of the issues, opportunities, and constraints. I want to note that this is not a complete list, but rather a highlight of some key takeaways. While we've previously highlighted safety, there are persistent and well-documented safety issues. Newton Corner is a high crash location with difficult merges and confusing travel patterns. Like much of the Commonwealth, our study area is vulnerable to climate change and is anticipated to face extreme temperatures and flooding near the Charles River in the future. Many of the intersections within our study area have documented accessibility shortfalls that should be addressed through the alternatives. There are opportunities to leverage the existing and potential future MBTA transit services in the area, providing clear connections to bus and commuter rail services. Similarly, there are opportunities to help connect bicyclists and pedestrians to the existing Charles River pathways. While these connections are just a short bicycle or walk from Newton Corner right now, they currently are not very comfortable or very direct routes, leaving opportunities for improvement. From an environmental standpoint, we have an opportunity to expand green infrastructure to help reduce heat island effect, improve public health, and manage stormwater. Our study area is also home to natural, historical, and archaeological resources to consider. The Charles River is nearby, and Newton neighborhoods are known for their historic character. Between Route 128 and Boston, there are limited highway exits, which means Newton Corner has to process a significant amount of vehicular traffic. The I-90 corridor and MBTA rail lines act as a barrier for north-south mobility for modes currently.
Christine,
Yep.
I just want to acknowledge that Counselor Oliver has his hand raised. Counselor Oliver, would you be able to wait to share your question or comment? Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to move into alternatives development, which comprises the bulk of this meeting. We're going to run through all of the initial ideas, but we want to note that these slides will be available to view during our breakout room discussions to come. We're excited to hear from all of you on if these align with what you've been envisioning. We've organized initial alternative ideas into 3 parts. So the first is what we're calling supportive elements. These are elements that should be considered under all alternatives. Next are alternative components. These are individual components that can then be layered onto each other to develop full alternative packages. And finally, we have just a few examples of how these components could be layered together. We understand there are many different combinations, and these are just a few examples to spark conversation. So first, we're going to go through the supportive elements, and the first one is pedestrian and bicycle elements. So essentially, every alternative should be seeking to create new pedestrian and bicycle connections through Newton Corner, as well as to existing Charles River pathways. We're looking to develop on-road bicycle accommodations and finding opportunities for separated bicycle lanes as well. We've also included placemaking here, creating an inviting pedestrian environment that makes Newton Corner feel like more of a destination. Next are transit elements. These are aimed at finding opportunities to incorporate things like transit signal priority, enhancing connections to existing services such as the buses and the Newtonville station that will be going through improvements to come. And finally, our safety elements. These include trying to provide more conventional and straightforward intersections for motorists, which include consideration of roundabouts to reduce conflict points, as well as adding fully accessible pedestrian accommodations and improving things like lighting and signage. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Matt to discuss the alternative components.
Thank you, Christine. Today, we have 16 different potential alternative components that we are going to touch upon. These represent an initial list we developed based on previous feedback that we've received, and we anticipate that additional components may be considered based on feedback from the working group and from the public. These individual alternative components can be layered upon each other to develop full concepts that will be presented at the next meeting. As I go through each component, I know it might be difficult to fully digest everything I'm about to present. Right now, I just want to introduce each of the components, and then we can dig into them a little deeper in the breakout rooms where all of the slides will be available for everyone to review. Jumping into it, our first alternative component is looking at two-directional travel in Newton Corner. To minimize weaving and increase safety, this would allow bi-directional travel on roadways in Newton Corner, including on Washington Street, north and south of I-90, and on the 2 existing bridges over I-90. This is an idea that we've heard in the past from the public, and it's likely that this component will likely be incorporated into future full concepts as one individual component. Another idea that we have heard is the consideration of installing roundabouts. Roundabouts can increase safety and simplify intersection operations. The next stage of the alternatives analysis would evaluate what locations would be appropriate for roundabout control. Moving on to the third component, this one is a little bit more out of the box. This component is a new bridge connecting Center Street south of I-90 with Center Street north of I-90. This would restore the historic roadway network of Newton Corner from before the interstate was constructed. A new bridge at this location could provide bi-directional travel, so two-way travel for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists, and it could help to simplify overall operations. Moving on to the next component. Like I said, I know there's a lot and we're going through these a little bit fast, but we'll be able to discuss them in detail in the breakout rooms. But this fourth component here, this looks at closing the existing I-90 westbound on-ramp and relocating it to a new location west of Newton Corner. Moving the I-90 westbound on-ramp would simplify operations at the current intersection in the northeast quadrant of Newton Corner. However, we would need to evaluate the feasibility of a new interstate connection west of the current location and understand how that would tie into the overall roadway network. On a similar note, alternative component number 5 here looks at closing the existing I-90 eastbound off-ramp and then relocating it to a new location west of Newton Corner. The existing off-ramp provides limited queuing storage, and shifting it to the west could potentially provide space for a longer ramp. An idea shown here on this graphic would be to have a new off-ramp connect to Church Street with a realigned Richardson Street providing access to Washington Street. However, similarly, we'd need to evaluate the feasibility of any new ramp relocation, and we also would need to consider right-of-way impacts. Okay, moving along, the next few components are going to look at enhancing transit accommodations in Newton Corner. This component looks at repurposing the existing Washington Street westbound bridge as a dedicated transitway. Now, this alternative needs a little more detailed explaining, so let me talk it through. If a new Center Street to Center Street bridge is constructed, as I talked about earlier in the third component, there's a potential to repurpose the existing westbound bridge for a different use. Here we are showing a transitway, which could serve as a bus hub for all buses traveling through Newton Corner. The benefit of providing a bus hub and transitway in this location is that it aligns with the routing of the MBTA Route 57, which goes up Galen Street and down Washington Street into Brighton, which is a key bus route and is expected to run every 6 minutes in the future with bus network redesign in place. The next component considers creating a bus transit hub in Newton Corner while maintaining the current bridges for vehicular use. Shown here is an idea to deck over a part of I-90 to provide a new mobility hub that would provide passengers with a comfortable place to wait and create one centralized location to connect with additional transportation services. This component, as shown, would allow for bidirectional transit travel on the existing Washington Street westbound bridge. On the graphic as shown, separate stops would be provided in the inbound and outbound directions, and a safe pedestrian crossing would be installed connecting riders to both sides. As I mentioned before too, these are just concept ideas. Nothing has been fully fleshed out. So the image on the graphic is just a potential concept. Another potential possible component is a potential commuter rail station in Newton Corner. Currently, the Worcester line of the commuter rail travels through the study area, but trains do not stop. And the nearest stop is at Newtonville, approximately 1 mile west of here. Based on coordination with the MBTA, any future decisions about implementation will need to be evaluated holistically from a multimodal perspective, and especially with regard to the way it impacts service throughout Newton and along the entire Worcester Line corridor. Shown on the graphic is a possible potential station location with pedestrian access provided from both sides of I-90. All right, moving on. The next component here involves decking over I-90. There's the potential to use decking to provide space for multimodal uses, bike paths, transit bus stops, mobility hubs, additional green space, and/or community space. Decking has a lot of potential uses that could be used to help improve mobility and help advance forward the study goals. Decking could also be used to help create a village center in Newton Corner and to provide a more welcoming environment for small businesses. All right, moving along. Now, the next few components are going to focus on pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. This component here looks at repurposing the existing Washington Street eastbound bridge. This is a similar vein of the transitway idea I talked about earlier. If a new Center Street to Center Street bridge is constructed, as I talked about in the third component earlier on, there's a potential to maybe repurpose the existing eastbound bridge for a different use. Here we are showing a pedestrian bicycle only bridge, which would provide a safe and comfortable way for pedestrians and bicyclists to cross I-90, separated from vehicular traffic. Another component could be to construct a new pedestrian bicycle only bridge over I-90 while maintaining the existing vehicular bridges. This would separate pedestrians and bicyclists from vehicular traffic and provide a safe and comfortable way for them to cross I-90. The exact location of a pedestrian bicycle bridge will be evaluated, but at the location shown on this graphic, a bridge could potentially tie into Center Street north and south of I-90, kind of in a similar alignment of the Center Street to Center Street Bridge we've talked about in previous concepts. Sticking with the theme of pedestrian and bicycle connections, we looked at ways to better connect Newton Corner to the Charles River pathways. This component here would create a neighborhood greenway along Charles Bank Road, connecting Newton Corner to the Charles River, which is in close walking and biking distance. The neighborhood greenway would be shared with vehicular traffic, and traffic calming measures could be implemented to ensure slow vehicular speeds. Another potential way to connect to the Charles River pathways could be with a shared use path along St. James Street. This would likely require converting St. James Street to one way for vehicular travel to provide space for the shared use path, but it would provide a direct connection for bicyclists and pedestrians from the south side of I-90 to the north side. The shared use path could either follow along Charles Bank Road to Nantum Road, following the path that vehicles take today, or it could follow a new connection to Nantum Road along St. James Terrace that would be constructed for pedestrians and bicyclists only. Another component we looked at, possibly, is creating a dedicated pedestrian bicycle bridge that could connect Newton Corner to the Charles River along the I-90 and the train tracks. The distance of this bridge would be approximately 1/3 of a mile. If this alternative were to progress, we know this one's also a little out of the box, the study team would need to evaluate the feasibility of constructing a bridge in this location, as there's quite a grade difference leading down to the Charles River. This concept here would tie into Newton Corner near the intersection of St. James Street today. Would it consist of a bridge paralleling and along I-90 and the train tracks, and then would tie down and land around Nonantum Road around where the intersection with Charles Bank Road is today. All right, last couple alternatives. Looking beyond Newton Corner, this alternative component would construct full interstate access at West Newton with a new eastbound off-ramp and westbound on-ramp. This would provide additional access to from the west on I-90, and it would relieve reliance on the Newton Corner interchange. If this alternative were to progress, we know that the study team will need to evaluate constructability and potential right-of-way implications. The potential concept shown on the graphic is just one possible idea. And we know if this idea was to progress, we would do a full evaluation of where would be the best places for these ramps to tie into the roadway network today. All right, and the final alternative component I'm going to talk about today is full interstate access in Brighton at the DCR roadway area. This has been included in previous planning studies for Newton Corner and could include full interstate access or partial interstate access. However, there would likely be constructability issues and impacts to the DCR property, including to protected parkland. So this alternative will need additional thought and analysis. All right, I've talked about a lot. We've talked about a lot of different individual components, and now I'm going to hand it back over to Christine to show some potential ways where you could combine these components and tie it all together.
Thank you, Matt. I know that was a lot to get through. Now I'm going to provide a few examples of how we could combine these components. And again, I want to clarify these are just 3 examples of seemingly endless possibilities, but we've developed a few examples to spark conversation. We are interested in your feedback during our breakout rooms on these, as well as any additional ideas or suggestions you are willing to share. So, the first combined alternative example is really focused on utilizing the existing infrastructure and right of way, but considering converting one directional travel to two directional travel on the roadways through Newton Corner. This alternative maintains the existing bridge locations, but seeks to simplify movements, minimize weaving, and improve safety. As an added layer to this, we could also consider reallocating existing right-of-way to accommodate non-vehicular modes in addition to vehicles. Our example B provides a new bridge connection north-south, reconnecting Center Street. This has been combined with relocating the I-90 westbound on-ramp in order to simplify that intersection in the northeast quadrant. We then layered on options to repurpose the two existing bridges, one into a pedestrian and bicycle shared use pathway, and one into a transit way that could support a bus hub. This option also includes considering two directional travel on Washington Street, both north and south of I 90. Another added way to achieve enhanced pedestrian and bicycle accommodations is to utilize Charles Bank Road as a neighborhood greenway, facilitating connections to the Charles River and Nonantum Road. Our final example provides that same new bridge connection north-south, reconnecting Center Street, and has also been combined with relocating the westbound on-ramp in order to simplify that intersection. We then layered on a new commuter rail station on the north side of I 90, as well as repurposing the eastbound Washington Street Bridge into a transit way for buses. This also includes considering that two directional travel on Washington Street, both north and south of I 90. And in an effort to achieve pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, is decking over I 90 for shared use path and green space, as well as utilizing St. James Ave as a shared use path connection to the Charles River and Nonantum Road. So we are now going to split up into breakout sessions so we can hear feedback from you on all of these initial concepts. We will divide you into 4 groups and you'll be assigned to a breakout room. In each room, we will discuss the alternative ideas presented and we'll have the slides available for discussion in each room. A study team member will be facilitating each breakout room, helping to lead the discussion and take notes. We'll be in the sessions for up to 30 minutes, and then you'll be invited back into the main room to discuss next steps. Patrick, our MassDOT project manager, will be floating around between rooms, and Rachel from MassDOT will remain in the main meeting room in case someone joins late or needs to rejoin. And Patrick, before you break out, I do see we have a raised hand.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Oliver.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry to be a troublemaker. I see the answer in the chat, but maybe I'm not being clear. So like well back in the presentation, while you were talking about bike infrastructure, there was one slide and it kind of had some arrows and it said, oh, they're going to be bike facilities or something at these locations. So yes, it was bike infrastructure, but it was indicating that it didn't look like it was a pathway. It looked like individual points.
So those it may have been difficult to see. And just for the whole group, you actually sent that message just to me. So I think for the benefit of everyone on the call, the question was that we may have missed this. What were some of the bicycle stations? So those facilities are not stations. Thank you for coming back to the slide. It may be a little bit difficult to see, but what those arrows are pointing to is actually those dashed or dotted red lines, I believe. Oh, yes, our dotted red lines or the the blue lines. Thank you. Thank you for explaining the legend.
So this is a graphic of the future bike network. It includes the existing facilities. For anyone who I think was on the last call, we had a very similar graphic that was the existing facilities. And this graphic we layered on top the future facilities, just so you can get like a full picture of what the bike network will look like in the future with the currently known projects. So the dotted red lines are on-road bike lanes. The light blue, it's like a hatched light blue, are separated bike lanes, and then the thick teal lines like along the river are the shared use paths. And then the call outs are just specifically calling out which facilities are either newly constructed since we started this project, such as the North Beacon Street facilities in Brighton, or proposed facilities such as the Washington Street shared use path, the Washington Street separated bike lane as part of the Washington Street pilot. And the Leo Birmingham Parkway will include a shared use path as part of that reconstruction. So that's just what this graphic showing.
Yeah, it definitely shows, near as I can tell anyway, separated bike lane from end to end on Washington Street. And right now, the pilot is just the western portion of that, or most of the western portion of that light blue line. So yeah, I get it. Thank you. And just so you know too, Christine, we don't have an option to like post to the general chat. We can only send it to one person at a time on the VHB side. So that's, for whatever reason, it was defaulted to your name. So I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
apologies for
Christine,
that.
it is. No, it's perfectly okay. But just so you know, nobody can chat to
Okay.
everyone. So, or you guys
Thank-
might be able to, but we can't.
Thank you for mentioning that, Councilor Oliver. Sometimes Zoom is a little funky, so for everyone's benefit, if you do want to ask like a question or comment, send it directly to me, Patrick Snyder, or Christine Chiarkis. We're going to open up the breakout rooms right now. I sort of split it up between working group members and members of the public. You'll all be shuffled together. Zoom set it up a little bit randomly, and we'll have one of us as facilitators in each room. We're going to focus this discussion on feedback on what we talked about with alternatives. And after we leave the breakout rooms, which will be in about half an hour, give or take, we'll open it up for more general questions or comments about the rest of the presentation, like more about bike lanes or future conditions, etc. So you should all receive an invite to join those rooms. Hi, Annie. I can assign you to a room right now. I think you joined a little late, so Zoom set it up weird.
I did. Thank you.
In room 2. And Diane, I can assign you as well. Okay, are you good to hang out here?
Yes.
Oh, 1 second. I'm going to pause the recording. After today's working group meeting, we're falling on the tail end of future conditions on the middle of this graphic, right? Beginning of alternatives development. You guys have looked at preliminary alternatives today. That's where we are. After today's meeting, we're going to continue to refine these based on the feedback you gave us in the breakout rooms. And if you'd like to give us any more feedback before we close up the meeting, we're going to talk through what you saw today at a public meeting later this month as well. That's on February 25th at 6:30 p.m. That meeting will also be held on Zoom. We would appreciate it if you can tell people you know, constituents, the rest of your organizations, any of your neighbors, etc. Following that public meeting, we're going to refine the alternatives based on public feedback and your feedback today, and we'll have some more concrete concepts to present as drafts later this year when we reconvene for alternatives analysis. We're aiming for that next working group meeting, working group 4, when we talk about alternatives analysis and those more defined alternatives, to be sometime over the summer. We can now shift into our discussion. I'm going to open up to members of the working group first. If you'd like to raise any hands and ask questions or provide additional feedback that came up in the breakout rooms. And if you're joining as a member of the public today, you'll be welcome to speak after that. Robin, I see that you have a raised hand.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The first question I asked, which I was told would be a good question to ask here, concerns the structure of the decision-making process and the impact on the resulting alternatives after the different levels of decisions have been made. And while it's wonderful to consider all the possible things that could happen here in Newton Corner, those decisions are being made within the context of a much larger working area. If indeed decisions are made to change the number of exit on and off ramps in West Newton or in Brighton, that changes the nature of the problems that we're dealing with here in Newton Corner. So it's almost premature to discuss building new bridges or having covered walkways or moving an entrance down a few blocks if we don't understand the nature of the problem we'll be dealing with, which will be very different if there are other ramps in other locations. So could you please speak to the order of the decision-making process and how that will impact what we have to work with here in Newton Corner? Thank you.
I understood a couple of things from that, one of them being sort of what happens after today, but also what happens at the end of this process if we come up with the ideas and we put forth, like you said, on-ramps as an example in other areas.
What I'm saying is it's very hard to discuss how to resolve the problems in Newton Corner if we don't know what the problems are. And the volume of traffic with which we're dealing and the dangers that it poses to the people in the rotary will be dramatically impacted by the presence of other on and off ramps within the 5 or so miles that we're talking about. And so the question is, it's almost a waste of time to talk about refining designs, and we can all toss out ideas and that's fun, but we can't have anything that's operational until we understand the context within which we're operating. So it's not just what happens next, it's how are you as the decision makers going to decide the bigger project so we can then refine our part of it. Does that help?
I think so. I think a large part of the answer to that is that's why we're here today. We're here today to get your feedback, members of the working group and those of the public who are in attendance, as well as at the next public meeting later this month in February, we're going to get more feedback. After today, we're going to move into alternatives analysis. Sort of at that point, based on the feedback that we've heard, we're going to start refining things into more of a package to analyze with evaluation criteria, like what the impacts will be that you're talking about. I think a large part of what I'm taking away from this is, okay, if we change the configuration of Newton Corner, is that going to put traffic elsewhere in Brighton and Watertown? During alternatives analysis, we have our traffic model that helps us understand what those regional impacts will be within the transportation network. So that's how we'll continue to look at it further during the study. Christine or Matt, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I think you did a really good job, Patrick, of answering it. So we're going to get into kind of a first level screening based on feedback we're hearing from all of you, as well as the public, and any, I'll say, fatal flaws. And then we're going to work to really define there'll be 6 concrete alternatives moving forward, and those will all go through really rigorous alternatives analysis.
Thanks, Christine. The next hand that I saw was from Ned.
Hi, thanks very much for the presentation and a lot of these creative options, the components. We appreciate your including the rail station. I think we're very interested to hear about, understand what's kind of the some of the thoughts about how these components get put together in the sort of alternative packages. What's the logic of how these things are organized and put together, and then thinking about fine-grained decisions about things like, is this piece of the rotary one way or two way? Is this bridge one way or two way? Given the makeup of these alternative packages, and I was also curious. I don't think the study website yet has sort of like a detailed existing conditions document, and I know that we've seen a lot of the a lot of information, a lot of traffic data in the context of the short and medium term planning processes, but you know, understanding if we're going to be sort of reconfiguring traffic circulation, it would be very helpful to understand what are the, you know, like the traffic flows. Like turning movement counts aren't going to tell us like how many vehicles are going from, you know, like Galen and Center Street down to Center Street south of the Rotary, and you know how many are coming from Washington Street to the eastbound on-ramp. That kind of understanding of the broad flows.
Thanks, Ned. Nate also brought up your last point about more details on the existing conditions that we already presented, and I'm going to look into that. The next working group raised hand I see is Amy Sangiolo. Sorry, I'm not going to get your last name quite right.
Sangiolo.
Sangiolo. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having this opportunity. Since we were all separated in the breakout rooms, I was wondering if there's going to be sort of a write-up with the questions and issues that were raised that can be shared prior to the next meeting, so that we can all have an opportunity to understand where everybody's coming from and what issues have been raised. In my working group, two things that I raised was one, it seems that it's preferred by you guys of having a two-way on Washington Street, because that seemed to be similar in all three of the proposed plans, combined plans that were presented. So I'd like more information about that. And then my concern was on the rail station, which I know that Ned mentioned. I'm just concerned that I don't know whether it truly is feasible, and I don't know if we're just spinning our wheels by including that. So I hope that you guys will take a look at that and really take a look at the actual feasibility instead of and not spend too much time if it's not going to go anywhere.
Thank you, Amy. I'll try and touch on all of your points. We're really here to examine what is feasible. Like I said, as we refine these alternatives based on today's feedback and the public meeting feedback, that's when we're going to move into analysis and examine more detailed feasibility. In terms of the commuter rail, that's something that we've heard at every meeting we've had so far for this long-term planning study. So it's something that we're continuing to evaluate in coordination with the T, and we're going to look further into that feasibility. You mentioned a preferred alternative being, I think the one that you mentioned was two-way Washington Street. We haven't identified any preferred alternatives at this point. The examples that we presented were combined examples to show how things might fit together. We haven't identified anything preferred at this point. And in terms of materials from the breakout rooms, we're going to write up notes from today's meeting. Each one of the breakout rooms was recorded. It might be a little bit difficult to get those individual recordings posted, but I'm going to try to do that. We will have notes that we synthesize and put together because we had a member of the study team in each breakout room. So we're going to condense those notes into a document, and that will be made available on the study website. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get it up before the public meeting, just because that might take some time to organize everything, but that will be made available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christine, I think we can move forward into the public comment period because I see some more raised hands that have been up, and we'll just have a wider discussion. Time check for everyone, it's 5:23, so we'll be looking to wrap up in about 10 minutes or so, but you're welcome to take your time discussing. I do have some raised hands already. If anyone else wants to raise their hand, just click the button at the bottom of your screen. We don't have a Q&A box, but if you would like to message me or Christine in the chat at the bottom of the screen with a written question or comment, you're welcome to. And if you can just state your name and affiliation, if you have one, as you start your question or comment, just for organizational purposes. The first general raised hand I saw was from Rufin. I'm sorry if I'm not saying that correctly.
Well, you're fine. Thank you. I'm resident of Newton Corner. And so, yes, safety is the first thing, is the most critical. And I think we should That's the focus of anything else. For that, I would like to see information transparency. We live in this area. We should have the right to know what you guys are studying, what has been analyzed. So I will say, have some poster like the 6 design, have some poster posted in that area, physically print out, so people can see it, to see in this area people live, what should I comment? That's my suggestion. So yeah, so far I still do not know where do I go to get information. And so I get very limited because me now, so I work full time, of course. And I particularly take this hour off work, just listen to that. And I will say 99% of people who work full time do not have time to come here to listen. So how should we share those information? That's a challenge. So that's what I want, is share information, please. Find a way to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick,
Yeah,
could I just
I
jump
really,
in? I just want to say that, Roof and your city councilors are here, and we're also great sources of information. Myself, John Oliver, and Maria Greenberg couldn't make it today, or your Ward 1 councilors. We come to these meetings. The meetings are also all online, and we can help you get all that information, okay? So please, you can contact us. I'm A. Leary at newtonma.gov. And all our information is on the City of Newton website.
I did contact Councilor Greenberg, and that's why Amy recommended me to contact Greenberg, Councilor Greenberg. And Councilor Greenberg recommended to me about this meeting or something like that.
Oh,
other
okay.
than that, nothing else, nothing. I know nothing other than that.
thank you. Thank you both
Okay.
very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Counselor and Rufin. Christine, I think this is a good opportunity to pull up the next slide, and we'll continue with the public comments that we have. But just in terms of where this information is, we do have a website about this. I'm sorry if it hasn't gotten spread far enough, but Rufin, I do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here. We have these working group meetings to organize subject matter experts, City of Newton, City of Watertown, City of Boston, get us all in a room together at the same time. But we do also have public meetings where we come out in the evenings and talk to everyone. Those opportunities, as they become available, are listed on this website. And we have an email list where you can sign up for updates. We send out email updates when those meetings are scheduled. On this website, I'm also going to put the link in the chat. There is also a documents page which has recordings from all prior meetings, all presentations, and it does include a study fact sheet, which I don't think it gets to the level of detail that you were referring to, but it does give an overview of why we're doing this study, what the goals are, and further information about how to get in touch with us. So if anyone would like to go to the website, you're welcome to download that, share that with whomever. We can also see about distributing that a little bit further on our side. So thank you for bringing that up. Madeline, you've had a raised hand.
Yes, given that your future demographic study shows that most of the traffic and growth will be in the Alston-Brighton area, and given that you've thought about having an entrance exit to the highway in that area, have you considered, if that happened, what impact would that have on Newton Corner traffic-wise, and how would that impact any of these scenarios that you're putting forward?
That's a great question. Thank you. Matt, would you be able to speak to that in terms of like the future conditions and alternatives analysis, or Christine, if you'd like to?
Yeah, I can jump in here a little bit. Yeah, so Madeline, we haven't gotten into a full analysis yet of how the different alternatives would impact operations and how like vehicles would move around. But as we move on to the next stage of the alternatives analysis, we're planning to do like a full detailed analysis where if you add a ramp here, what would that do to traffic operations there? How many vehicles do we think would use one of these new ramps? That will be in the next stage. This is just more of the brainstorming session. But to talk a little bit about the model, as I mentioned earlier, we developed a 2050 future conditions model based on the CTPS travel demand model that looks at land use and future development projects. And so that's how we came up with the growth rates for Alston, Brighton, Watertown, and for Newton.
But isn't it pretty important to, I mean, if any of those extra entrances and exits happened, wouldn't that have a real impact on what happens in Newton Corner? And wouldn't that have a real impact on the kinds of decisions that need to be made about what we need to build here?
It would, and that's what we're here to do.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you for clarifying. We are going to start to wrap up because it is 5:30, but I just do want to open the opportunity for any further written questions and comments, or if anyone wants to click the raise hand button to speak verbally. Hearing none, we are going to move to wrap up. Christine, if you stay on this slide for just a second. I did mention this website that we have that's on mass.gov. And then you do / Newton Corner long-term planning study with dashes between all of those words. That has somewhere to sign up for email updates. We send out emails every time that we have a meeting for this study. And there's plenty of documents on there from previous meetings as well as meeting recordings and additional resources like our study fact sheet. Getting word out about these meetings, these processes is always a challenge. So if any and all of you could please just tell one person or two people that we're doing this and point them toward the website where they can sign up for updates, we would really appreciate that. There is also a virtual meeting room linked on that website where you can submit site-specific feedback. You can also reach out to me by email. If you have additional questions, my email is patrick.l, as in my middle name is Leonard, .snyder Snyder at dot.state.ma.us. And just moving forward, as we close out, a reminder that our next public meeting will be February 25th at 6:30 p.m. If you could also tell people about this, please. There's registration information about that on the study website for how to join Zoom. Christine, just looking forward to the next slide. We do appreciate you all taking the time out of your day. Thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you again soon. This meeting recording will be posted online along with the slides. Thank you very much and have a good evening, everyone.